Good morning and welcome to Royal Windsor. The big day has finally arrived.
Just hours from now, Rachel Meghan Markle is going to walk down the aisle to her real-life prince. It really does seem straight out of Hollywood when you think about it.
In just the United States, 29 million people watched Harry and Meghan get married. That's more than any other royal wedding.
Meghan Markle, she's the first American to marry into the British royal family in more than 80 years. A biracial actress who's made a name championing the causes of others.
Today we're going to see a major step change in the British royal family.
The story of the royals is really remarkable. People never stop caring about them.
Here they come! Oh my goodness!
Wow, that's amazing.
All the pomp and ceremony, all the glamour. The Americans can't get enough of it.
So majestic.
Bit of history in the making there.
It's princesses, it's fairy tales.
How exactly did we get here? It's been a really wild ride.
Shine bright like a diamond. Shine bright like a diamond.
There is only one job that the royal family has. There's a lot of duty, there's a lot of protocol, there are a lot of expectations, but only one job: survive.
The royal family really is the longest-running reality show in certain ways. From day one, we have felt connected to these people's lives.
In fact, it's the human story. I think that's what fascinates people.
The comedies, the tragedies, but on the grandest scale possible.
We saw Prince Harry and William grow up in the public eye as shy boys into teenagers, into men.
Because they keep reproducing, each new generation rediscovers them, and we keep falling in love with them again and again.
Queen Elizabeth, her emphasis on duty has kept the crown viable going into the 21st century.
Princess Diana shook the modern monarchy.
She became the most famous woman in the world because she broke expectations.
We all got swept up in the Diana passion.
Your Royal Highness, take one.
The very first American marrying into the royal family.
We're in the party now.
She's created this new brand of fairy tale. Everyone who has a similarity to her now feels accepted.
Since the American Revolution, we've been fascinated with the British monarchy. Americans definitely feel that this is their story.
I think for many people, the romance of being a royal that has lasted for so many centuries remains strong and powerful.
Welcome to the Duchess Effect. This is a course that teaches how to emulate the style, grace, and poise of a duchess. My shoulders are back. My feet are gently one in front of the other. Chin parallel to the floor. Smile, smile.
I think Americans are so obsessed with the royal family because we don't have one ourselves.
Curtsy to the Queen.
Excellent.
America is probably the country most in love with the British royal family. I would argue even perhaps more than the Brits themselves. You know, because why not? The Americans don't have to pay for them. They don't have to feel like, I don't know how I feel about having as our head of state an unelected figure. And of course, too, you know, in a way, British history is also partly American history.
It's exciting to see, you know, a duchess or a princess and to get to, you know, kind of visualize what that type of life is.
So graceful.
You grow up with this fascination of, oh, I want to be a princess.
There's been a reboot of the British royal family. All of a sudden, they're younger and more appealing than before.
The House of Windsor is more popular and in demand than it's ever been. Unlike the Kardashians, this soap opera has got a heritage.
Your Highness! Your Highness! Your Highness! Great party! The princess thinking Princess Carl.
Fairy tales are about a few things.
Okay.
They're about fantasy,
Your Highness, isn't there anything to do around the kingdom anymore?
imagination, a certain amount of grandiosity in our thinking of what could happen. Could I be a princess?
Your Royal Highness, take one.
Meghan Markle is a biracial girl. She was born in Los Angeles. Her parents split up when she was only a toddler.
Meghan was raised with her mom in a 2-bedroom apartment above a garage.
Her mother was this little yoga teacher. I actually was sitting across from her at one of the musicals. She just had this pure delight on her face watching her daughter. I think Meghan knew that she was a very loved child, even though she had the split family.
Nice, huh? You like the ponytails?
She had buck teeth, frizzy hair. She didn't think much of herself, but she was a smart girl.
We live within a world, we live within a reality, we live within a society in which people's experiences are often dictated by how they look.
There was a questionnaire at Meghan's school which had students check the box for black or white. Meghan went home and told her dad that she was confused. Which box should she check? And her dad, I loved his answer, said to her, make your own box, Meghan.
Probably because of some of the things that she went through as a little girl, Meghan was always looking outside herself. She was very intent on changing the world around her for the better.
She had this amazing depth and capacity for compassion. She was watching television one day and an Ivory soap commercial came on and it said,
"Women are fighting greasy pots and pans with Ivory Clear."
She was very troubled by this. Her father said to write to someone. And so she chose to write to Gloria Allred.
And apparently I replied with some words of encouragement.
I don't think it's right for kids to grow up thinking these things, that just mom does everything.
She also wrote to Procter & Gamble. Within a very short time, Procter & Gamble actually changed its ad to say,
"People are fighting greasy pots and pans with Ivory Clear."
I feel like Meghan was born poised. She's like, that's not right. I'm writing a letter about that, and I'm going to try to correct an injustice in the world.
That story is an example of being the change you wish to see in the world. Even at age 11, she was action-oriented.
How much of a sense did you have, Meghan, of the enormity of what you were getting into?
I did not have any understanding of just what it would be like.
Before Meghan, there was Diana.
The weddings are great. The marriages are terrible.
They have become the world's most famous dysfunctional family.
The amount of paparazzi and hordes of cameras all the time. She was thrown to the wolves.
We have been waiting around all day to see her. We have not. There she is. There she is.
She's beautiful. Oh, God. Such a beautiful person in the whole world.
Americans really loved Diana.
When Prince Charles and Diana came to the White House, that was big stuff.
Washington socialites and officialdom have been in a tizzy for weeks.
You can't turn on a TV news show without seeing saturation coverage of the visit of Chuck and Di.
Have you ever seen our country go so stark raving nuts about royalty?
I think William and Harry both have really tried to extend Diana's vision of what the monarchy can be.
If Prince Harry was running for the president of the United States, he had a pretty good chance of winning. Harry and William have become huge stories in this world because they're amazing Americanized mother.
You have to say for Diana, what she's done is a wonderful job with those children. Poor Diana, I think one of the key episodes of her life was when her parents split up when she was 6. She remembered her mother driving off and saying, "I'll be back." But then she wasn't. I think it did affect her for the future.
Diana may have had a damaged childhood, but when it came to having kids, these abandonment issues actually made her a better mom.
Diana, she was an amazing, unroyal mother. No other mother hugged the way she hugged her children.
She hugged them and kissed them and loved being physical with them in a way that we really didn't associate with the British royal family. And that was just like every American family was. And so, of course, we warmed to the sight of these two delightful young boys.
Charles was raised as it was in the old days, centuries before. He couldn't even brush his own teeth with his toothbrush. These kids were never going to be the same. Their mother was never going to let this happen. I think she realized that this world is changing. The British king and queen are not going to be separated from the streets of Britain.
That's why she took them to theme parks, to fast food restaurants, but also why she took them to visit homeless shelters and involve them from an early age in her charity work. These were the people that they were there to serve. Diana saw that William and Harry had to understand what life was like for normal people.
I've taken the children to all sorts of areas where I'm not sure anyone of that age in this family's been before. And they have a knowledge. They may never use it, but the seed is there, and I hope it will grow.
While William and Harry had to understand what life was like for ordinary people, they would never be normal. Their lives were always going to be special.
William and Harry were famous since the day they were born. So they grew up in this reality that they couldn't get out of.
They had no private life. And having no private life was no fun as a child.
Growing up, Harry and William started to see the signs of fracture in their parents' marriage. They were aware that that fairy tale on the surface wasn't necessarily so behind the scenes.
I see 1, 2, 3, 4 fires that have just been set.
Rioting and violence in south central Los Angeles last night in the wake of the verdict against Rodney King.
South Africa approved the government's plan to abolish apartheid.
Democracy and freedom for all.
Bill Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States.
The American people have voted to make a new beginning.
Britain is record unemployed, record homeless, record house repossessions.
Mayhem and rioting. Community leaders blame unemployment for the violence.
The growing hostility in the media to the royal family.
They have become the world's most famous dysfunctional family.
People started wondering if the monarchy would survive.
Fire has swept through Windsor Castle and caused enormous damage.
1992 is not a year I shall look back with undiluted pleasure.
In the late 1980s, there was a growing tension inside palace walls between Charles and Diana. The marriage was in trouble.
Distance between them could not be disguised. The papers dubbed them the Glums.
They were two very complex and needy people who were unable to meet the other's needs. They were both bitterly unhappy.
There came a point when I realized that huge amounts of energy were being spent on enabling, particularly Prince Charles, to carry on a double life with his mistress.
This is where the fairy tale cracks and reality comes in. And reality is often very different than the fairy tale. There's no mistress in the fairy tale. Her prince became a frog.
From Diana's point of view, she was expected just to grin and bear it. She knew that unless she did something that would break this logjam, she was destined to a life of unhappiness and basically lying.
Well, certainly the signs are that the honeymoon is over, and they have been apart for a considerable amount this year.
She knew that I was writing a biography about her, and she contacted a mutual friend, a chap called James Coldhurst, and said to him, would Andrew like an interview? I was, of course. I would write some questions out for Diana and give them to James. And he would take these questions on his push bike to Kensington Palace, go into Diana's sitting room. Diana would put on a microphone, the tape would start playing, and Diana would chat away. I was astonished. Diana's talking about this woman I'd never heard of called Camilla. She was talking about an illness she suffered from called bulimia, never heard of it. She talked about suicide attempts. It was astonishing. Diana wrote a letter to James Coulthurst saying that we're expecting a volcano to erupt, and in 1992 it duly erupted.
The royal family was beset by scandals.
Prince Andrew and Fergie are planning a formal separation. Princess Anne, Queen Elizabeth's daughter, has filed for divorce.
Buckingham Palace has condemned newspaper photographs of the Duchess of York, including some of the Duchess sunbathing topless.
There were amazingly intimate stories we were hearing now, and images we were seeing of the royals doing things that we'd never seen before.
And then, when the book that Diana was working on with Morton was released, it shook the nation.
A new biography of Diana claims she has often become depressed because of a loveless marriage.
Andrew Morton's book was selling out in some shops today and was at the center of fresh controversy.
Princess Diana has attempted suicide 5 times since her marriage to Prince Charles.
You couldn't write the stories that you were hearing. It literally was a soap opera.
The motivation was to tell the truth, because we do face a crisis in the House of Windsor. It's obvious to everyone.
Difficulties of a private nature within the royal families. You know, I knew it was there, but not that it would come one on top of another.
I want to see my way along you. Not over you and up and down you and in and out. Oh, particularly in and out.
Diana outed Camilla with Andrew Morton. And then there were a series of tape recordings that put Camilla fairly and squarely as Charles's lover.
I can't start the week without you. I feel like your tank. Yes, you do. Perfectly do. Yeah.
Did you try to be faithful to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down.
I think Prince Charles's broadcast with Dimbleby did quite shock people.
It dawned on a lot of people that this was quite obviously a tit for tat, that it was part of an escalating war for public sympathy. It became known in the media as the War of the Waleses.
Dimbleby was followed up by Diana's terrifying broadcast with those big black ringed eyes.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
I quit for a lot of reasons. The most obvious one was Panorama. I had not been consulted. I would have advised her to do it very differently.
She needed to look at somebody and say, there were 3 people in the marriage. That was a big deal to say on national television. The British royal family didn't know what had hit them.
Suddenly, the image of the royal family was changing overnight.
I think it's just a further embarrassment to the throne, really. It's just another embarrassment to the Queen.
What does it say about the royal family? There now are 2 separations of the children, the sister Princess Margaret's divorce.
The monarchy, all it is these days, like it or not, is a family institution. It's there and is a paragon of Christian family life. If it loses that family image, it loses everything.
When I spoke to the Queen, we very quickly agreed, look, we need to try and see what we can do to stop this getting worse.
I wish to inform the House that Buckingham Palace are issuing the following statement. With regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
When you think about all that happened with the royal family at this time, it's fascinating to think about what was going through the Queen's mind. Because this is a woman who had spent her entire life devoted to her duties and devoted to projecting an image of strength and fulfilling her patriotic duty. And now, here she is in Windsor Castle, surrounded by all of this history, and she must have felt like it was just crashing down.
Fire has swept through Windsor Castle and caused enormous damage.
In that year came the fire at Windsor, the great symbol of the permanence of monarchy up in flames. So was a great sort of symbolism of that.
It's come at the end of a year for her that has been extraordinarily difficult. The Queen is quite devastated by what has happened.
She was going to give a speech on the Monday at the Guildhall. Her voice was quite crackly, made by the smoke she'd inhaled.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
She comes up with this Latin phrase, annus horribilis, horrible year.
We are all part of the same fabric of our national society, and that scrutiny by one part of another can be just as effective if it is made with a touch of gentleness, good humor, and understanding.
It was a difficult year, but you always knew the Queen would remain utterly committed to her role, her undertaking, her duties.
There has been a terrible accident involving Diana.
When Diana died, the world kind of stopped on its axis.
She was a light that's gone out in our country now, and nothing will replace her.
Both of us have always been open to each other. We never really talked about losing a mum at such a young age.
It is divorce for Charles and Diana. Today's headlines from Britain speculate about what the future holds for the princess.
Princess Diana began owning her celebrity as she began to move out of the royal family. By the time of the divorce, Diana had been on a huge journey. She began as a young girl without much of a voice. We hardly heard her say a thing. Then Diana began speaking out.
Everyone needs to be valued. Everyone has the potential to give something back if only they had the chance.
It was the Oprah era. We were all supposed to be letting our feelings show.
Hello, Diana.
Diana went along with that.
Princess Diana was the people's princess because she was relatable.
I wish that.
She was the first glimmer of, she's real.
You could see that people wanted the Diana monarchy more than they wanted the Queen monarchy. They wanted one that was more approachable.
I think Diana should be queen. She's very much a contemporary woman, and I think we all admire her.
She really did hold a mirror up to the monarchy and say, look at yourselves. You say you care, but you don't kind of touch people in the crowd. You need to be out doing stuff.
She recognized that in her position, she really could move the needle on important social issues.
For her to take on these world causes, AIDS, leprosy, landmines, and change people's perceptions were astonishing, really.
She was perceived by a lot of disenfranchised, dispossessed people as being their princess because her experience, much of it sad, was something that they could relate to.
People just fell in love with her. It was almost like the Virgin Mary. I think there was almost a worship for her.
In Paris, it all fell to pieces.
The amount of paparazzi and people following her and hordes of cameras all the time. She was thrown into the wolves.
I had woken up for some reason at about 4 o'clock. Couldn't go back to sleep. There was a message on the telephone answer machine, and it was a newspaper editor saying, I expect you've seen the news.
There has been a terrible accident involving Diana, the Princess of Wales, in Paris.
I remember being woken by my mother from Sky News, and I picked up my buzzer, and it said Royal Dan, the code for a death in the royal family. You know, one of those moments when you wake up and you can't really take it in.
Buckingham Palace confirmed the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. The princess died following a car accident in Paris.
There were thousands of people, ordinary people who had just gravitated towards Buckingham Palace, like an instinctive response to the news.
She was a light that's gone out in our country now, and nothing will replace her.
When Diana died, the world was kind of stopped in its axis.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated.
Shocking. There's a person who was so public and so present
and then to have that just erased.
I can't think of a more significant person in our sort of modern society to have lost in such a tragic way.
I think she showed that the royal family wasn't something that was still stuck in the 18th century, and she tried to drag it forward.
The body of a princess so loved by her people on either side, just some of the millions who mourn.
All these people had come to the home of the monarchy, and there was nobody at home.
The palace empty, with no flag flying.
The British public were just going crazy. Where is the Queen? Where is the royal family? Why is the royal standard not flying at half-mast over Buckingham Palace?
I really am upset. I can't understand the Queen doing it, really.
No, very, very, very disgraceful, I find their behaviour. Very disgraceful.
For the past 5 days, most of the royal family have been 521 miles away at Balmoral.
That week of the princess's death, the Queen faced a dilemma. Do I go back to London? Do I speak now? Or do I, as a grandmother with a sudden, terrible tragedy in my family with 2 young sons, do I stay with them? It wasn't that easy for the Queen.
That was probably the lowest moment for Queen Elizabeth because her response was seen as so out of step with what the people were expressing.
Duty, service, protocol. The Queen had been taught her entire life to follow those principles. And she did it very well. It's one of the reasons that the Queen was so popular in England. She was not accustomed to everybody in England criticizing her and asking her for more.
She's basically having to make up a response to this public outcry that has no precedent.
The royal family departed from Balmoral to begin the journey to London.
The royal family returned to London and the Queen made a statement.
Queen Elizabeth is about to address the British nation, a very unusual public television statement.
What I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart.
In her speech, she said, "I'm a grandmother." And with those 3 words, she changed the way we felt about her. For the first time in her life, it seems that maybe she had chosen family over duty.
No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death.
The Union flag at half-mast, protocol, tradition swept aside.
She'd given orders that the Union Jack should fly at half-mast above Buckingham Palace.
For the Queen and Prince Philip, this was their first sight of the royal residence, now garlanded with 1,000,000 bouquets.
The Queen takes this small step that ultimately showed maybe she had more in common with Diana than we realized.
They walked outside the palaces. They saw the flowers. They spoke to people.
Mao has never seen a scene like this.
The Queen said after Diana had died, we need to reflect on the example of her life.
Diana showed that the world had changed, and guess what? It's never going to go back to the way it was.
It has been a week which has shaken the monarchy, and the very virtues of the royal family in the past, the self-control, lack of emotion, are now seen by a modern generation as inadequate.
Her Majesty walking out through the courtyard.
I suddenly saw the Queen and the royal family completely unscripted walking out of Buckingham Palace to stand on the side of the road with the public.
You've never seen the royal family standing like this at the gates of Buckingham Palace.
And I pushed my way through the crowd, and luckily the BBC had left a ladder against a tree. And I managed to climb the ladder.
Right in front of Buckingham Palace, the Queen bows her head.
We have the only shot of the Queen bowing her head at that coffin as it goes past.
Sometimes a gesture can be worth 1,000 speeches.
I think that was the royal family bowing before the truth of what Diana had meant to the people of this country.
Diana, she's a manifestation of the royal family realizing they are engaging in the modern world.
A lot of people are critical of Prince Charles. They saw what happened to Princess Diana, and he was the villain in that case. But he's also a tragic figure in many ways.
The burning question in every loyal heart is, when will the prince marry?
Prince Charles married the virgin bride he was supposed to marry.
Charles and Diana, the fairy tale marriage that hit the rocks and stayed there.
Camilla Parker Bowles was perceived as a homewrecker, frankly, and public opinion of her was very low.
Their first official appearance together caused a storm. Hundreds of flashbulbs, dozens of opinions.
After Diana's death, Charles had actually been saved by Camilla. He's not a strong man. She is a very strong woman. And she bolstered his confidence. She made him laugh. She made him lighten up.
Charles and Camilla hosting of a children's party this afternoon was another reminder of his determination to make her role in his life more public.
Prince Charles began to show his feelings in his determination to marry Camilla.
There is talk this morning that Prince Charles will finally marry his longtime girlfriend, Camilla Parker Bowles. Buckingham Palace is abuzz because the Queen has to approve of any royal nuptials.
It's a future King of England, head of the Church of England, marrying a divorcee.
The last time there were constitutional issues involving a British monarch was Edward VIII, who wanted to marry an American divorcee, and he had to abdicate. The Queen and Buckingham Palace have agonized about this.
Charles to wed Camilla. That was the news that swept across Britain today.
The Queen gave her formal consent to the marriage last night.
The Queen is allowing the royal family to modernise.
I think she's probably thought we are in a modern society.
William and Harry clearly saw their parents going through a lot of tough times, and I think when Camilla came along, they were just happy to see that their dad was happy too.
She's a wonderful woman, and she's made our father very, very happy, which is the most important thing. William and I love her to bits.
How are you feeling, ma'am?
All right.
Just all right?
I'm just coming down to earth.
Very much a story of our times, isn't it? A divorced man marrying a divorcee.
It is time to move on. If Prince Charles and Camilla wish to get married, we should support that. And I must say, I'm absolutely delighted.
Hello, good morning.
Now here they come.
married to 33 years for this.
The biggest irony is that it was Diana and the lessons learned from her that allowed Prince Charles finally to marry Camilla Parker Bowles. We'd learned that suitability on paper wasn't everything. Actual personal affection mattered more.
He deserves to be happy. He and Camilla have been through quite a lot together.
Camilla and Charles are this really complicated love story. But it's a very modern love story.
It's their story. If it lacks the power to amuse and charm the world, it is nonetheless their story.
After she and Charles were married, the minute people met her, they liked her. And she has absolutely no airs and graces.
A performance of traditional throat singing had her very much amused.
I think people want people to be happy. And the Prince of Wales is happy. He is a completely changed man.
Media columnists called him a national disgrace.
He was sometimes struggling with his identity. He lost his mother in the public eye at an extremely young age.
Hello. Nice to see you. Thanks so much for sparing us. Not at all. Please, come on in.
Each monarch brings some of their own personality to the role, and I sense that you're saying that when the time comes, you will hope to be a rather more modern monarch.
I think the royal family has to modernise and develop as it goes along, and it has to stay relevant, and that's the challenge for me.
In order to maintain our interest, they had to become less obscure and more like us. So they become more accessible, more like people we could imagine hanging out with.
Tomorrow, Buckingham Palace goes public.
It's a very generous suggestion on the part of the Queen.
Queen Elizabeth II, the monarch of the United Kingdom, has tweeted for the first time.
I think Prince William is very like his grandmother, the Queen.
If you listen to public opinion, the crown would go straight to Prince William and miss out Prince Charles. That ain't going to happen. It's a hereditary monarchy, and that means it passes from one generation to the next. But people are really focusing on Prince William and the future of that reign.
When Diana died, things had to change. So they put in an agreement that basically said William and Harry would have their privacy, and I think they were allowed to grow up, have the freedom they needed to become the young men that they are now.
The whole of Eton made a real big difference with everyone not trying to sort of snap a picture every time I was walking around the streets, and I hope it just continues for Harry as well while he's there.
I think at Eton and at St Andrews we worked very hard to try and give them the space to grow up and develop and, make their mistakes and have their celebrations just as other children do.
This period was so important to William because he so desperately needed some normalcy, more so than any other royal heir ever, because until William's generation, there was no constant media feeding frenzy. He had lived his life on the front lines, and he needed to see what life could be like and meet different kinds of people.
The Diana and Charles courtship was very, very quick. We all know that that marriage ended in total disaster. Given the fact that that had happened, William had basically carte blanche to marry who he wanted from whatever class he wanted and spend as much time as he wanted finding the right bride.
Kate, of course, was a woman who had a very kind of conventional upbringing. Her parents were, working. It was middle class, but it wasn't aristocratic. She went to university, was educated, was, normal in a sense.
I remember the first few times we saw Kate, and we were literally sort of saying, is that her or not her? Because we weren't sure, because nobody had really seen her. I remember her sitting in a Waitrose enclosure having a sandwich, and then we went over to her saying, would you mind doing a photograph? And she said, I'm not going to do that, because if I do that now, I'll have to do that forever. And suddenly alarm bells, oh, you know, she's obviously, she thinks she's here for the long term.
Catherine Middleton.
Suddenly, if you get an inkling that this is the one he's going to marry, this is one that you'll be photographing for the next 20 years, it's a massive story.
Happy birthday, Kate.
I think what made not only myself, but the American public realize, wait a second, you don't have to be born into a royal family to become a princess, was definitely when Kate Middleton at the time started dating Prince William. And it was the first glimmer of, wait, can an average person become a royal?
The relationship actually lasted 8 years before he asked her to marry him. So I think in that time, she definitely had a good, long, hard look at what the future might be. And she was much, much better prepared for life as a princess than William's mother had ever been.
She knew the drill, but she was up for that, you know, and they were going to carve out ways that they could be like a real couple.
When Prince William announced that he was marrying Catherine Middleton, there were a lot of raised eyebrows at the palace, I seem to remember. People were quite shocked that he was marrying what they would call a commoner. So I think it was a real change for how the monarchy sees itself, and that it is opening up and is perhaps becoming more relevant to ordinary people.
It's quite a daunting prospect, but hopefully I'll take it in my stride. William's a great teacher, so hope he'll be able to help me along the way, and I really look forward to it.
Prince William's wedding, of course, particularly interesting because you create a new queen and therefore a new dynasty.
To see Kate Middleton become the Duchess of Cambridge was almost a moment of, that could have been me, that can be me. And people sort of went wild about it.
Good morning to America. We are so excited to join you, and reportedly 1/3 of this planet watching all the majesty, pageantry, and history, not to mention the simple possibility.
I'm so excited. The adrenaline is pumping through me.
Really?
I've been waiting my whole life for this moment.
I'm excited. I can remember as a little girl watching Lady Di, so this is important to me.
The wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge literally was bonkers. They were just massive. London came to a standstill.
I don't think that anybody thought they'd get the press attention. And the Queen said, the whole world's gone mad. Look behind me. You know, there are 500 photographers.
I think what I remembered most was Harry, actually, humanizing the whole thing, looking over his shoulder and seeing Kate coming up the aisle looking absolutely glorious and whispering something to his brother. It was touches like that that actually made it feel like an intimate family wedding rather than a state occasion.
And there are the bells of Westminster, heralding their new life.
There is always a fascination in Britain when you see a commoner arrive at the place of their marriage as whatever their name is, but they leave as a Royal Highness. That's huge, because it's not just something that you can go and cash in at the bank. It's also an expectation of how you're going to live the rest of your life under the scrutiny of what is often called the gilded cage.
Prince William and Prince Harry, they don't know any different, do they? That's their life. They have grown up as members of the royal family with their destiny mapped out for them.
They've done a really good job, though, to protect their privacy, perhaps more than any of their predecessors could have.
They understand that as heirs to the throne, they are, to a degree, public property, and that people are fascinated by them, but they really do crave a sense of privacy and normalcy.
Kate and William are quite guarded. They do have press receptions, we do get to meet them, but you never really learn very much. I think they keep themselves to themselves. And when they're on the public stage, they expect to be photographed.
Ladies and gents, I just need to ask you to stand over to the other side of the road, please. Thank you.
When Prince George was born, it was, you know, a huge international story. There was media camped outside Buckingham Palace and St Mary's Hospital for days and weeks. There was a headline here in Private Eye, which is a magazine over in Britain, and the headline was, "Woman has baby." And I think in a sense that sums up for some people. It's like, yeah, big deal, she's had a baby. Whereas, of course, around the world, people were just like, oh my goodness, there's a royal baby.
That was quite exciting because you literally were photographing a future King of England. Seeing that little baby born, it really was historic.
It's been such fun. I've sung and danced and had a whale of a time, really cheered, and it's really, really good news.
When we see the Duchess of Cambridge standing on the steps 7 hours after giving birth, people don't remember. She's a working royal, and people expect to see their princess. They expect to see her in flesh, and she understands that responsibility.
That woman is a rock star. It's like, I don't care how much makeup she was wearing. Most of the husbands can't walk 7 hours after the baby is born, and she's out there. I mean, I've spent less time at the DMV.
When it comes to the royal family, there's kind of this lose-lose situation. If you look too perfect and too curated, then you're setting the bar too high. So when Kate Middleton came out of the hospital looking glamorous and thin, women are saying, hey, you're really holding us to unfair standards. But at the same time, if she came out looking a mess, we would not be okay with that either. The reality is that we don't want to see our royal obsession fail. We don't want ordinary. When we're paying good money for magazines, or even when we're looking at our news feeds, we want the fantasy.
In many ways, Kate and William do look like the perfect royal family for the 21st century. They waited to get married, they waited to have children. The only tiny thing, perhaps, is that Kate didn't have a career before her marriage and hasn't had very much of a voice since it, which perhaps makes her look just a little bit like a throwback to the older tradition of royal brides. But hey, guess what? Now they're going to have Meghan Markle to do all that.
The world's most eligible royal is off the market. Prince Harry, now officially engaged.
We're very excited, delighted for them both. And for me personally, I hope it means he stays out of my fridge.
One of the interesting aspects of the royal family these days is the closeness of William and Harry.
He is the one person on this earth who I can actually, you know, we can talk about anything and we understand each other and we give each other support and everything's fine.
When Harry said a few years ago that nobody in their right mind would want to be king, I mean, that must be something those two brothers have talked about a lot. And he must have been the most relieved of all when William and Kate started producing children. You know, at one stage he was next in line to William.
Harry and William are seen very differently. That's becoming more apparent as they get older. In a way, Harry's been cut more slack. William would never have been allowed to make the mistakes Harry has.
I suppose it could get quite dull if there weren't any baddies around.
Prince Harry was a bit of a wild child, but all that managed to do was to make him more popular. I mean, the naughtier he was, the more the sort of crowds there were sort of, beating at the barriers to try and see him, and he's sort of like the Beatles.
This is the stuff of soap operas. He's out there, and he's not as manicured and as refined as some of the other royals.
What kind of message are they giving about themselves? These aristocrats, these aristobrats, actually.
The famous incidents are when he wore a Nazi uniform to a friend's 21st birthday party. And then, of course, there was the famous Las Vegas incident where he was caught playing strip billiards. He's obviously not very good at strip billiards because he was wearing, I think, 2 or 3 ethnic bracelets and nothing else.
At one point, various Fleet Street mavens, these media columnists, called him a national disgrace, which of course he wasn't.
He did a lot of stuff that was really not cool. Not for a royal, not for anybody. But he was in pain. He was in a kind of unacknowledged pain. People were so worried about how upset he got when he thought about his mother that they said, don't think about your mother. Tuck that away. That's not an unwell-meaning thing to say to a child, but that pain manifests itself in other ways.
As a member of the household at the time, you feel even worse that you didn't recognise that there were other issues at play as well. It was a very difficult, tough time.
Unfortunately for Harry, he had to go through all of that publicly.
In some ways, I think he wanted to disappear, and there's no better way to disappear than to go off to a war zone.
I honestly believe that the army was the making of Harry.
Prince Harry did 2 tours of Afghanistan. On the first operational tour, he was a forward air controller.
Roger, if you can call 30 seconds and I request flares and as low as possible.
People just don't generally see those in the monarchy really fighting on the ground. Prince Harry, from the very beginning, did not want to be a celebrity. He did not want to be a famous member of the monarchy who would go there as a show.
I'm going down, I can see it.
The army was a fantastic leveler of people. He wasn't also asked to be the prince. He was just asked to be Captain Wales.
It's very nice to be sort of a normal person. For once, I think this is about as normal as I'm ever going to get. Should we call it that?
Talk about Mission Impossible. One of the world's most photographed royals had been fighting for months in Afghanistan, and no one knew about it. That is until some foreign newspapers caught wind of the deployment and published it. Now, well, Prince Harry is back home and now being referred to as Harry the Hero.
Prince Harry was somewhat embarrassed by the fact that he was pulled out because he was a famous celebrity and the assumption that he would be targeted by the insurgents.
But flying back, he was with guys who were very, very badly wounded in action. And that had a profound effect on him.
Hello. Hi. Welcome home.
Do you know John, don't you?
I'll see you again.
They got back to RAF Northolt, and the soldiers went off in an ambulance, and he went into a press conference where he was being treated as though he was a hero, which he absolutely couldn't stomach.
No, I wouldn't say I'm a hero. There's guys who, 2 injured guys who came back on the plane with us. One who'd lost 2 limbs, a left arm and a right leg, and another guy who was basically saved by his mate's body being in the way.
His brother could see what was going on. His brother and father had come to meet him, and his brother called a halt to the press conference.
We're going to have to call it there because Prince Wales is waiting for us downstairs.
Okay. And from that moment on, it sort of sealed his fate, if you like. He pinned his colours to the mast and said, I'm going to work for the rest of my life for these guys.
Prince Harry came to the United States and he witnessed competitive games for those who were wounded when they come back from the war. He fell in love with the warrior games. And when he came back, he decided that he would start something very similar.
I cannot tell you how proud and excited I am to open the Invictus Games here in America.
When Harry created the Invictus Games, it really solidified his role in the royal family, and it also surprised him in a way and made him realize that he had a power that very few people in the world possess.
The Invictus Games saved me, really.
I was at a stage where I wanted to take my life at one point. Now I don't want to take my life, I want to take it as far as I can do.
It's not that long ago that he was sort of the prankster prince who looked like a liability to the royal family. Yet now he's looking like the royals' greatest asset.
Harry is the proof of the power of transformation. That is the American story.
People can relate to Prince Harry and Prince William because they see them as being flawed and vulnerable and having this tragic past. So when we look at Prince Harry and Prince William, we don't say you guys are perfect. We say, you know, you have done amazing things in spite of your losses.
Both of us have always been open to each other, saying, you know, we've never really talked about it. We've never really talked about losing a mum at such a young age. And when you speak to other people's families and little kids and stuff, you think, wow, you know, I don't want them to have to go through the same thing. So you want to, with a little bit of experience, you want to help as much as you can.
There still is a stigma for people seeking help. And rather than say, I'm going to keep this private, Prince Harry came out and really is using his platform the way Princess Diana did with AIDS.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know. So you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
William and Harry have both found purpose for themselves in charity work, and they've also found it to be a way that they can honor their mother. And so when it comes time to finding a partner, both of them need someone who is going to have that same humanitarian instinct. And the whole world was waiting to see who that woman would be for Harry.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome American TV and film actress Meghan Markle.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am tremendously honored to be UN Women's advocate for political participation and leadership. I am proud to be a woman and a feminist.
Meghan is a multidimensional person. And I think too often we have a tendency to try to pigeonhole people to say that you are an actor or you are an activist. But she demonstrated a capacity and an interest and actually a ability to thrive.
Meghan Markle!
She'll say, we need to talk about race. We need to talk about women's rights. We need to actually stand up and be effective advocates toward equality and equity, and those are things that people often are not doing.
If you have a profile where people are listening to what you're saying, I really, truly think you need to be saying something that's valuable.
I think it's very difficult to make it in any capacity in the television business. I had never met Meghan before she walked in the room, and she sat down, read the role.
I'm not falling for you pretending to be my friend.
And I remember Kevin Bray, the director, and I looking at each other and being like, wow, this woman knocked it out of the park.
We're done here.
I have to say, if a scriptwriter had gone into a Hollywood office and said, look, I've got a great idea for a new princess. She's biracial, she's the great-great-great-granddaughter of a slave, and also she's divorced. Oh, and by the way, she strips off quite often in a TV series. They'd have said, get out of here.
This is not a woman who in previous generations would have been considered a proper choice for a prince.
They met on a blind date. They were set up by a friend. And Harry walked in, saw this amazing-looking girl, and thought, I'm going to have to up my game here. Conversationally, I've got to be on good form. And he obviously was, because because they then had a second date the next night.
When I discovered that Meghan had fallen in love with the Prince of England, it was sort of crazy. It's like, you can't believe it. Someone you know, it's a fairy tale thing.
But she kept it from all her friends for a while, which was really smart of her. But at that point, I was like, oh my goodness, things are gonna change now for you.
You know, the fact that Prince Harry suddenly started dating an American TV star, as a royal photographer, you couldn't quite believe it. I mean, it was just, yet again, this royal story that keeps on giving.
His two previous serious girlfriends, Chelsea Davy and Cressida Bonas, were seen off by the intrusion of the media. Meghan is different in as much as, because she's an actress, she's been courting publicity.
That gorgeous smile straight ahead, there it is.
So I think she is much better prepared for it than anybody else could be.
Oh, as soon as it was announced that Meghan was dating Prince Harry, the British media went into a kind of a default racist mode. They were talking about the fact that Meghan's mother, Doria, lived in an area where there were bloodbath murders, where there's gangland killings.
There were also some comment pieces that were pretty nasty, and Harry became utterly furious and issued on Facebook, interestingly enough, a warning to the press to back off. He said, "She is my girlfriend, but we are human beings. You cannot treat human beings like this."
It must have been incredibly painful, a lot of the things that were said. At the same time, I think she realized that she was now in this powerful, unique position to explore issues of race and feminism. These are not conversations the royal family had ever been part of before.
I think what makes Harry and Meghan so good together is Meghan is not obligated to advocate for people that can't advocate for themselves. She just wants to.
Women don't need to find a voice. They have a voice. They need to feel empowered to use it, and people need to be encouraged to listen.
While she, as a member of the royal family, is not supposed to take a political position, feminism is political.
When I look at Meghan Markle, I think of her as a person who is atypical to the princess story because she made herself. She built her own career, developed her own politics, and then became an active and passionate advocate for those beliefs. You know, so when a prince comes along, you know, that person's going to be enamored by this self-made, intelligent, articulate person. So no, a prince didn't save her. I think that she might actually save him in the end.
Can we start with the proposal and the actual moment of your engagement? When did it happen? How did it happen?
It happened a few weeks ago, early this month, here at our cottage. Just a standard, typical night for us.
It's a cozy night. It was just an amazing surprise. It was so sweet and natural and very romantic.
She's come to Britain and she's brought those values of equality, intelligence and self-confidence to the royal family. And in a way, she's made them up, all of them, up their game.
It bodes well for the royal family's future. And I think we need this kind of thing, you know, I really do.
She's reaching people who probably never had a part of the royal family story.
As a brown girl, who's about to have a brown princess.
She's reaching into the African American community. She's reaching millennials. I mean, she's very hip. She's a style icon. She had a blog.
You're a DJ. No. I saw the red button. I said, oh my goodness.
So she's reaching into people's hearts and minds who feel that the royal family was stuffy.
Like how he represents like the modern kind of royals.
We've not really had anybody mixed race before in the royal family, so I think it's really important.
It's the biggest change I've ever had, but it's not stopping them this time.
Only a few years ago, no one would ever have believed that Meghan Markle would be our next princess. Maybe that's how the royal family really come to symbolise things for the world.
I think it's a real step change.
There is a balm in Gilead.
How the royal family see themselves and that it is opening up and perhaps becoming more relevant to ordinary people.
Ho yay, ho yay, ho yay! It's Harry and Meghan's big day.
The anticipation for Meghan and Harry's wedding was like nothing that I had ever seen. There were viewing parties all over the globe. People really sensed that it was an important historical moment and everybody wanted to be part of it.
I mean, it's wild. We've been up since 3 a.m. Hundreds of women have ascended onto the Plaza Hotel with hats and fascinators and feathers.
Here at Immaculate Heart, we really believe in sisterhood. So she's like our sister, literally like our sister.
So there's 40 women at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's been great.
I think Americans are excited because it feeds into the fascination they already had. But the fact that Harry has chosen to marry an American who is of mixed race heritage just feeds into everything Americans love and crave about the royal family.
For me as a black man in America to see this beautiful inclusiveness into the royal family, this is a great message to the world, I think.
She's going to change the way people see us.
It's a British royal wedding, so we were coming. Why not dress the part?
We've come a real long way, and all along we are modernising and accepting the world that we live in and all that's happening around us. So they're not stuffy and immovable. They're definitely moving with the times.
I just remember the day Obama got elected was exactly the same feeling I had seeing them together. It was just this moment of hope and change.
Happy wedding, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I hope you enjoy your time together. Good luck and God bless.
I was in a car, one car behind her. We're driving and everyone's waving and they have their signs and we're like, oh, how awesome, cute. But then as we got closer, the crowds got bigger and then people screaming. And then it got to a point where it's just all we saw was people. And then you pull up to Windsor and you're like, holy moly, this is really happening now.
I've been waiting for you to come around and tell me the truth.
She comes walking in and I just started shaking because I was trying so hard to hold my tears in.
I've got time, I've got love.
I have worked at 3 royal weddings, and this was by far the most vibrant, the most multi-dimensional, the most multi-layered.
The late Dr. Martin Luther King once said, and I quote, "We must discover the power of love."
For us in Britain, we're not used to seeing pastors preaching that way.
Jesus did not get an honorary doctorate for dying. He sacrificed his life for us. That's what love is.
The message was so very Meghan because it was about unity, it was about love, and it was about accepting the differences and really focusing on the change.
The power of seeing her mother in that place, and it's the power of that wonderful sermon that we heard.
Now, the power of love is demonstrated by the fact that we're all here. 2 young people fell in love, and we all showed up.
just in the United States, 29 million people watched Harry and Meghan get married. That's more than any other royal wedding.
Give me a minute to hold my girl. Give me a minute to hold my girl.
This goes to show you how much of this is an American phenomenon. I think there's this combination of it's relatable and it's enviable.
I think it's just so romantic to see like an American princess. She's kind of one of us. It makes us feel like, oh, we can find a Prince Charming.
She's created this new brand of fairy tale because everyone who has a similarity to her feels accepted.
So many girls will wake up this morning across the world and look at TV and see somebody that looks like them.
What's so beautiful about the story is that there's a happy ending. This is a wedding of a man who lost his way, lost his identity, and eventually found it. And we're fascinated. Who is this woman that has captured this man's heart and perhaps can help maintain a certain level of stability? So this royal wedding is really about a happy ending. And perhaps a new beginning.
Good evening, Sir Bond. Good evening, Your Majesty.
If I'd been asked when I was her press secretary in the mid-1990s, do you ever imagine that it would be possible that the Queen would have an audience with James Bond and then go and open the Olympic Games? I'd say there's not a chance in hell. I'd bet my entire house on that, never ever happening. And yet, 15 years later, that's exactly what did happen. And it was an extraordinary surprise that was part of a new modern monarchy.
She became an icon. People are grateful that something hasn't changed in 70 years. It's like if something can stand the test of time, the gratitude of the public is enormous.
She has come to perfectly embody our feelings of patriotism. But one day, sadly, the Queen will die.
This is an institution that's got on the horizon, coming closer every day, a major brand crisis. And William, and to a lesser extent Harry, are the best hope they have of surviving that crisis.
They're like the family that lives next door. They also happen to be royals. They've taken kind of the mystique out of it, and they've replaced it with relatability. And if their popularity of the family has increased, that's been the trade-off. That was the right trade to make.
Unlike the Kardashians, this soap opera has got a heritage.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
You know how I feel. The royal family continues to be relevant generation after generation.
Half the battle, isn't it, is how to adapt in the best way without losing that element of continuity.
The addition of Princess Diana to the family made them go from a stiff upper lip culture to a very relatable and yet glamorous royal family.
I think the British people need someone in public life to give affection, to give them light in their dark tunnels.
It's a new dawn, it's a new day. Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton are continuing to make the royal family relevant.
We need a global understanding that we cannot implement change effectively without women's political participation.
With Meghan and the royal family, you've got celebrity and royalty. And in actual fact, what's happened over the last 20 years is that royalty has become an arm of celebrity.
Meghan is changing the face of the monarchy.
She's a manifestation of the royal family realizing that they are engaging the public world as it exists in 2018.
it feels like a widening of the tent. It feels like a welcoming of a greater group of humanity.
It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life.
And that makes us all feel more welcome.
It's a princess today. I'm feeling good.
The world is changing. We can be represented in the royal family.
And then, you have these enchanting appearances by Prince George and Princess Charlotte, which, cause the whole nation to go, ooh.
Dragons fly out in the sun.
George and Charlotte and Louis are going to be the sources of fascination going forward. How they begin to reveal their personalities. They're the ones who are going to interest people the most. Particularly George, because at some point, he will ostensibly be the King of England.
For us, the royal family represents all that is positive, optimistic, and hopeful. The royal family is very much a fairy tale for most Americans. We grew up on Disney. We grew up on castles and wanting to be prince and princesses. It's part of our celebrity worship. You have people who are brilliant and are speaking for a cause on top of being glamorous and talented.
The story of the royals is really remarkable. We never stop caring about them. We're always fascinated by them. With each new royal birth, we become reinvested in the royals. We love the glamour. We love the soap opera of their lives. They are really part of our DNA. Not just in Britain, but really all over the world. And I just don't see them ever going away. Not anytime soon.